Last Tuesday started like any other until the world I thought I had built with my bare hands crumbled faster than a house of cards tossed into a hurricane. I had taken a day off, the first in months, because my son, Ryan, and daughter, Claire, were both graduating from medical school. 2 white coats, 2 dreams paid for by a man who had worked double shifts without once asking for anything in return. My wife, Lauren, insisted we throw a big party afterward, inviting all her friends, most of whom I barely tolerated but smiled at for the sake of peace. I spent the morning polishing the backyard, setting up tables, stringing lights, hauling bags of ice like some underpaid caterer while Lauren disappeared upstairs for hours. When she finally came down, her hair done up like she was heading to a gala, something in the air around her felt wrong. A sharpness, an electric thrill she didn't bother hiding. She kissed me on the cheek with lips colder than marble and floated past me like I was furniture. Guests poured in by the dozens. The backyard swarmed with fake laughter and the clink of wine glasses. I made my rounds, playing host, beaming with pride every time someone congratulated me on raising 2 doctors. My chest felt tight, but in a good way, like all the sleepless nights, the missed holidays, the broken promises to myself had finally meant something. Then it happened. In the middle of a toast Lauren insisted on making, she pulled a man from the crowd. A man I had seen once or twice before, never paying much attention. He looked about my age, dressed better than me, a perpetual smirk curling his mouth like he knew the punchline to a joke I hadn't heard yet. Lauren lifted her glass high, voice ringing clear over the murmuring crowd. "Everyone, I want you to meet the man who truly built my life." There was a heartbeat of confusion. I laughed awkwardly, thinking she was about to say my name. Instead, she turned, practically glowed, and laid her hand tenderly on the stranger's shoulder. "This is Daniel," she said. "The real father of Ryan and Claire." I didn't understand. I couldn't understand. My mind grabbed the words and turned them over and over, trying to make them fit somewhere inside the reality I knew. But they didn't fit. They smashed everything inside me into pieces too small to ever glue back together. Someone laughed, thinking it was a joke. Lauren laughed too, but it was the laugh of a woman who had been dying to scream the truth and was finally allowed to. She looked at me then, eyes bright and merciless, and said to her friends in a stage whisper, "Mike was just the wallet." The laughter that followed wasn't cruel or mocking. It was worse. It was casual. As if I had always been the fool, the last one to find out, the man who didn't matter. I don't remember crossing the space between us. I don't remember taking the microphone from her hand. All I know is that 1 second I was standing there, heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped animal, and the next second I was holding the mic so tightly it squeaked in my hand. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I simply turned to my children, no, not my children, strangers now, and said, "Congratulations. You're finally free to call him Dad." I dropped the microphone. The sound cracked through the speakers like a gunshot. Silence. For 1 delicious second, the party froze. All glasses midway to lips. All eyes stuck on me, on her, on the wreckage of what she had just done. Even Daniel had the decency to look vaguely uncomfortable, shifting from foot to foot like a schoolboy caught in a lie. Lauren broke the silence with a toss of her hair and a dismissive snort, like I was a stray dog making a mess at her party. "I should have told you sooner," she said, voice dripping fake pity. "But you never would have understood. You were never enough for me, Mike. Not then. Not now." Something inside me snapped then. Not anger. Not sorrow. Something colder. Quieter. A part of me that had spent 20 years patching walls and painting over cracks finally picked up a sledgehammer and started swinging. I turned without a word, walked past the crowd, past the children I had raised but who had already averted their eyes, ashamed or maybe complicit. I no longer cared. I climbed into my truck. I didn't grip the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I didn't sit there questioning my life. I pulled out of the driveway, tires spitting gravel across the manicured lawn Lauren had obsessed over for years, and I didn't look back. Not once. Not even when I heard her call after me, not with regret, not with apology, but with pure, venomous indifference. That was the day I realized you can pour your soul into someone's life and they can still set fire to it with a smile. And my story, believe me, is just getting started. The drive away from that place should have felt freeing. Like shackles snapping off my wrists. But instead, it felt like slipping into a void. A place where the rules I had lived by loyalty, hard work, sacrifice suddenly meant nothing. The town blurred past the windows, neon signs smearing into colors I didn't care to read. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat again and again. Lauren's name flashing, then Claire's, then Ryan's. I didn't answer. There was nothing left to say. I didn't go home. I couldn't. Instead, I drove aimlessly for hours, ending up in front of the only person I knew wouldn't ask questions, my older brother, Sam. His porch light was still broken, a single dull bulb swinging from a frayed wire above the door, but when he opened the door and saw my face, he didn't hesitate. No fake concern. No useless words. He just stepped aside and let me in. I barely remember falling onto his old, creaky couch. Somewhere in the background, I heard the pop of a beer bottle cap hitting the floor, the muted buzz of a sports game on TV. Normal sounds. Sounds from a world I had just been exiled from. I told Sam everything. Not in a neat, orderly way. The words stumbled out, bleeding into each other, the years, the sacrifices, the betrayal at the party. The look on Lauren's face when she spat out the truth. Like it was something she had been polishing inside her for years, waiting for the perfect moment to throw it at me. Sam listened without interrupting. Only when I stopped, breathing hard like I had run a marathon, did he speak. You're not gonna like what I'm about to say, he said, leaning forward, his elbows on his knees. But you need to hear it. I didn't care anymore. Let the world keep punching. I could take it. You gave your life to a woman who never deserved you. And your kids? If they knew, and they still let you bleed for them all these years, then they don't deserve you either. The truth hit harder than Lauren's betrayal. Somewhere deep down, I had still been clinging to the idea that Ryan and Claire were victims too. That they hadn't known. That they hadn't stood by, smiling, while I played the fool. But hearing Sam say it out loud, I knew he was right. I barely slept that night. My mind kept replaying the party. Lauren's bright, smug smile. Daniel's sheepish, practiced nods. The way my kids had shifted their weight awkwardly but said nothing. Nothing. If they had even an ounce of loyalty, they would have stopped her. But they didn't. Morning light slithered through the cracked blinds, harsh and judgmental. I hadn't moved from the couch. That's when the doorbell rang. Not once. Twice. Then a loud, impatient pounding. Sam looked at me, his face already hardening into something I had seen only a few times before, when he fought off a drunk guy who tried to mug our mom years ago, and when he caught his own wife cheating and threw her and all her things into the street without a second of hesitation. You want me to get rid of them? Sam asked, already standing. I shook my head. I wanted to see who had the audacity to come after me now. I opened the door. It was Claire. My daughter, or rather, the girl I had fed, clothed, loved for 22 years. Standing there with a look on her face that made me want to slam the door before she could open her mouth. A mixture of pity and annoyance, as if I had inconvenienced her by shattering like glass. She didn't wait for an invitation. She pushed past me, dropping onto the couch with a dramatic sigh. Dad, can we not make this a bigger deal than it is? I stared at her, struggling to process the words. She picked at her nails like she was bored. Look, Mom made some mistakes, okay? But does it really change anything? You're still, like our real dad. I couldn't speak. I couldn't even breathe properly. She glanced at me, frowning. You're not gonna be one of those bitter guys who ruins everything over something that happened decades ago, right? It took every ounce of self-control not to scream at her. Not to tell her how deeply, irrevocably she had betrayed me just by standing there, minimizing everything. Instead, I said in a voice I barely recognized, "Did you know?" Claire hesitated just for a second, but it was enough. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and said, too quickly, "It's not that simple, Dad. Mom told us when we were teenagers. She said she didn't want to hurt you. That you worked so hard for us. We thought it was kinder not to say anything." Kinder. The word rattled around my head like a broken bell. You thought lying to my face for years was kinder? I said slowly, the taste of the words bitter on my tongue. Claire rolled her eyes. Actually rolled her eyes. It's not like it would have changed anything. You were always the guy who paid the bills and fixed stuff. You're dependable. Dependable. Not loved. Not respected. Useful. Like a broken ladder you keep around because it still reaches the attic. I turned away from her. I couldn't look at her anymore. I couldn't stand to see the pieces of Lauren's cruelty alive inside the girl I had once rocked to sleep. Go home, Claire, I said. Dada, go. Home. She hesitated, then stood, muttering something under her breath about drama and overreacting before slamming the door behind her. The house fell into silence again, but it was a different kind of silence now. A silence with teeth. Sam appeared behind me, clapping a heavy hand on my shoulder. You're not done yet, he said. I knew he was right. This wasn't just about Lauren anymore. It wasn't even about Daniel. It was about burning every rotten bridge they had built out of my broken trust. It was about reclaiming whatever scraps of dignity they hadn't managed to tear apart yet. And it was only just beginning. The hours after Claire left felt like wading through quicksand. Every breath, every thought dragged me deeper into a place I didn't know how to escape from. But staying still wasn't an option. If Lauren thought I was just going to vanish quietly into the background like an old photograph in a dusty attic, she hadn't learned a damn thing about me in 18 years. By late afternoon, I had a plan. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't anger. It was something colder, something cleaner. Closure. But not the kind she expected. I grabbed the small box I kept hidden at the back of Sam's closet, the papers, receipts, documents Lauren never cared to look at because she was too busy orchestrating her perfect life. Inside was every proof I needed, the house deed, the car titles, the insurance policies, all under my name alone. I called my lawyer. Told him to meet me first thing in the morning. But tonight I had unfinished business. I drove back to the house, not creeping like some ashamed ghost, but walking up the driveway like it still belonged to me. Because it did. The porch lights were on. Laughter spilled through the open windows. She was throwing another party. Of course she was. Why waste time mourning a husband when the wine was flowing and the world kept spinning? I walked in without knocking. Heads turned. Glasses froze midair. For a moment, the only sound was the low thud of music from the speakers. Lauren spotted me from across the living room, standing there in her expensive new dress, gold jewelry glinting under the chandelier. She gave me a smile, a slow, deliberate thing that oozed triumph. Mike, she said sweetly, holding her wine glass like a queen greeting a peasant. Did you forget something? Daniel was there too, lounging casually on the couch like he had always belonged there. His arms slung across the back of it, dangerously close to the spot where I used to sit every evening after work. I walked straight to the center of the room. Every guest's eyes followed me, a current of unease rippling through the fake sophistication. You, I said to Lauren, my voice loud enough to slice through the music. Outside. Now. Her eyebrows lifted in mock surprise. Or what? You'll throw another tantrum in front of my friends? The smirking faces around her, the ones who had toasted me just months ago, congratulated me on my beautiful family, started to snicker. I didn't move. I didn't blink. Finally, Lauren sighed dramatically, setting her glass down with a clink. Fine. If ITLL get you out of my house faster. Our house. Outside, the air was cooler, the stars hidden behind low, heavy clouds. She crossed her arms, tapping her foot impatiently. Make it quick, Mike. I have better things to do tonight than rehash your feelings. I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time without the lens of memory or hope or love. And I realized something. She had never really loved me. Not the real me, only the parts she could use. You're moving out, I said, voice flat. She laughed. Actually laughed. You're cute when you try to sound tough. This house? It's mine. I pulled the deed from my jacket pocket and tossed it at her feet. She blinked down at it, confusion flickering for the first time across her polished face. You signed away your rights the year after we bought it, I said. Remember? You said you didn't want the stress of paperwork. You wanted me to handle all that boring stuff. So I did. She stooped, snatching up the paper, her hands trembling slightly now. And the cars, I added. Both in my name. The insurance policies. The retirement accounts. You're entitled to what the court decides, sure. But this house? It's not yours. Not legally. Her mouth opened, then snapped shut. A thin line of fury tightened her jaw. I gave you everything, she hissed. You gave me lies, I said. And you're not taking one more thing. For the first time, her armor cracked. Not enough to make her apologize. No, Lauren wasn't built for remorse, but enough to strip away the smug superiority she had worn like a second skin. You think this changes anything? She spat. You think anyone cares? You're still just the pathetic man who got played. She turned on her heel, stalking back toward the house, spitting venom over her shoulder as she went. I didn't follow her. I didn't need to, because in that moment, standing there on the dark lawn, I realized the one thing she never would. I hadn't lost. She had. She just didn't know it yet. I turned and walked away, the sound of the party behind me growing smaller with every step. I wasn't running anymore. I was taking everything back. And the next move would be mine. The next morning wasn't bright or full of hope. It was a cold, metallic kind of day, the sky a slab of unbroken gray. I sat in my lawyer's office, the heavy smell of burnt coffee in the air, going over every single paper that legally tightened the noose around Lauren's perfect little empire. Mr. Harrow, a man who smiled like he enjoyed dismantling people, slid a thick folder across the table to me. Sign these, he said, and you'll officially file for divorce today. She'll get served within the week. It should have felt victorious. Instead, it felt surgical. Precise. I wasn't swinging wildly at Lauren anymore, I was cutting out the disease she had planted in my life. By noon, the wheels were in motion. Everything she thought she controlled was about to slip out from under her manicured fingers. But Lauren wasn't the kind of woman to surrender quietly. It started that night. I was staying at Sam's house, sleeping lighter than I ever had in my life, when a pounding at the door jolted me awake. Sam was already up, standing near the window, watching. You might want to brace yourself, he said. I pulled on a shirt and opened the door. Lauren stood there. No party dress, no makeup, just pure, unfiltered fury. Behind her, headlights from a black SUV painted her figure in sharp relief. You think you can humiliate me? She hissed the second I stepped outside. I stayed silent, watching her come apart. It was better than any speech I could have made. You think a few signatures and a smug little visit to a lawyer is going to erase me? She went on, voice cracking. What are you doing here, Lauren? I asked calmly. I'm not leaving. She snapped. You think you're going to kick me out of that house? I built that house. I raised those kids. I tilted my head slightly. You mean Daniel's kids? The slap came fast, but not fast enough. I caught her wrist midair. Not hard enough to hurt, just enough to stop her cold. Her eyes widened, realizing she didn't have control anymore. I let her go immediately. You don't get to hit your way out of this, I said. She yanked her arm back, shaking with rage. But there was something else underneath it now. Fear. For the first time, real fear. I have nowhere to go, she said in a low, ugly voice. Daniel's not. He's not who you think he is. He's not going to take care of me. And there it was. The real Lauren. Not the confident woman who had paraded him in front of a crowd, but the opportunist whose lifeboat was suddenly sinking. You made your choices, I said. Live with them. I turned and walked back inside, shutting the door behind me. For a long time, I just stood there, feeling the silence press against me. No guilt, no second thoughts, just a clarity so sharp it almost hurt. But Lauren wasn't finished. The next morning, my phone exploded with messages from friends, coworkers, even distant relatives I hadn't heard from in years. Screenshots. Posts. Lauren had gone public. She had written a massive post on Facebook painting herself as the abused wife, the tragic figure who had suffered in a loveless marriage with a cold, controlling man. She posted old photos, pictures of me exhausted after night shifts, looking rough, framed to make me seem monstrous. She hinted at emotional neglect. She even implied, without saying it directly, that the reason she found love elsewhere was because I pushed her away. And people believed her. God help me, some people actually believed her. Old neighbors left comments like, "Stay strong, Lauren." Mutual friends shared her post with heart emojis. Even Ryan and Claire liked the post, giving her public approval like loyal little soldiers. I sat there, staring at the screen, feeling something colder than anger rise inside me. This wasn't just betrayal anymore. This was war. Sam leaned against the kitchen counter, reading over my shoulder. "You gonna let her set the story?" he asked. I shook my head slowly. "No," I said. "Not this time." And just like that, the next move was mine. I didn't rush. Lauren wanted me to lash out, to scream into the void, to look like the monster she painted me to be. Instead, I went still. Still like deep water, the kind that drags you under without a sound. The first thing I did was simple. I logged into an old email account she had forgotten about, the one she used for every shady thing she never wanted traced back to her. Lauren wasn't careful, she was arrogant. She thought she was invincible because I had never looked before. But now everything was fair game. And what I found there? There are no words. Years of conversations. Photos. Receipts. Not just Daniel. There were others. Men she had entertained when Daniel wasn't available. Gift cards she bought herself and labeled as Mike's gifts to justify them later. Trips she took under the excuse of girls' weekends that were nothing more than private vacations with men whose names she probably couldn't even remember. It wasn't infidelity. It was a lifestyle. I sat back in Sam's old kitchen chair, the air around me heavy, buzzing. Not from anger, from opportunity. Lauren wanted a war. She just handed me the ammunition. The second thing I did was hire someone. A guy Sam knew, someone who specialized in retrieving things. Not violence. Nothing illegal. Just information. The kind that can't be ignored when it's laid bare. Within 48 hours, we had a complete file. Bank statements showing transfers she never declared during our marriage. Text threads where she admitted hiding assets from me. Even a recording where she laughed about how stupid Mike is. He'll never leave, he's too proud. I didn't go public. No, that wasn't the way. Lauren thrived on public attention. Victimhood was her drug. Taking that from her would hurt far more than embarrassing her. So I made 3 moves. First, I had my lawyer amend the divorce filings to include financial fraud and hidden marital assets. That alone would put her on the defensive and potentially land her in criminal court if she pushed too hard. Second, I sent copies of everything anonymously to Daniel. Let him see exactly who he had bet on. Let him stew in the realization that he wasn't her savior. Just another fool in her parade of fools. And third, I contacted a few of Lauren's key friends, the ones who had commented the loudest under her Facebook post, cheering her on. I sent them a simple message. Before you pick sides, you might want to know the whole story. Attached were select screenshots, just enough to crack the foundation. By the end of the week, her world had started to tilt without me ever raising my voice. I didn't hear it happen, but Sam told me through his crooked smile that Lauren had been thrown out of her own book club after one of her closest friends confronted her. Apparently, it got ugly. Tears, screaming, a broken wine glass, and Lauren storming out, alone. Meanwhile, Daniel? Gone. He packed up and left, leaving nothing but a note that reportedly said, "Good luck explaining this mess." Lauren called me 3 times that night. I didn't answer. She texted, swinging wildly between rage and pleading. One message burned itself into my mind more than the others. "You're ruining my life. Stop it. Please. Mike, please." I didn't reply, because it wasn't revenge. It was balance. For every lie she told, for every knife she slipped between my ribs with a smile, the universe was finally delivering the bill. I thought that would be the end of it. But then Ryan showed up at Sam's door, eyes bloodshot, fists clenched, looking like a man who had lost everything and didn't even understand why. "Can we talk?" he said, voice cracking. Sam looked at me, silent, waiting for my move. I stepped aside and let my son, the boy I had raised, loved, broken myself for, into the house. But forgiveness wasn't on the menu. Not anymore. Ryan stood there, just inside the door, as if stepping fully into the room would somehow commit him to something he wasn't ready for. He wasn't a boy anymore. He was a man. Tall, broad-shouldered, the kind of man I once dreamed of shaping into someone better than me. And yet, looking at him now, all I saw was a stranger draped in familiar skin. He shifted awkwardly under my gaze, rubbing his hands together like he was trying to warm them against a cold he couldn't fight. "I didn't know it was this bad," he said finally. I said nothing. The words hung in the air between us, empty, weightless. He didn't even look me in the eye. "I mean, yeah, we knew Mom wasn't perfect," he went on, fumbling for words. "But you were never around much either, Dad. You were always working." There it was. The excuse. The shield. I almost laughed. Almost. "You think I wanted to be working 2 jobs, Ryan?" I said, voice steady. "You think missing your games, missing your birthdays, breaking my back, was a choice I enjoyed making?" He looked down at his shoes, shame flickering across his face for half a second before pride kicked it away. "We didn't ask for that," he mumbled. "No, you didn't," I agreed. "You asked for nothing. You took everything, without ever once asking if it was costing me my soul." He flinched like I had slapped him, but he didn't back down. Good. Maybe he was still my son somewhere under all that poison. "I came here because—" He started, hesitating, chewing on the words like they tasted rotten. "Because I don't want this to be the end." I studied him carefully. Was it guilt? Fear? Or just the sudden realization that his mother's house of cards had collapsed, and he needed a new shelter? "You made your choice when you stood by her side," I said. "When you liked that post. When you said nothing while she dragged my name through the mud." "I didn't know everything," he snapped, a flash of anger breaking through. "Did you ask?" I shot back. Silence. "No," I continued, stepping closer. "Because it was easier to believe the worst about the man who fed you, clothed you, sacrificed everything for you, than to lift a single finger to defend him." Ryan's jaw tightened, his fists clenched, but there were no words. "You wanted to believe her lies," I said, "because it meant you didn't have to question yourself, didn't have to face the fact that you were a part of it." He blinked fast, fighting something inside himself. I didn't care. I was done fighting for people who didn't bleed for me. "You think an apology fixes this?" I asked. He faltered, the fight draining out of him. "You think you can show up here, say sorry, and we pretend the last 20 years weren't built on lies you helped protect?" Ryan swallowed hard, shoulders sagging under the weight of it all. "I still see you as my dad," he said, voice cracking. I let that hang there. Let it cut him open like a surgeon with a steady hand. "Good," I said quietly, "because a real father teaches his son something important. Here's your lesson, Ryan." He looked up, eyes wide, desperate. "Actions," I said, "not words." I walked past him, opened the door, and stood there, waiting. For a long moment he didn't move. Then, slowly, he stepped outside, shoulders hunched, head bowed. The pride that once made him untouchable now shattered at his feet. I closed the door softly behind him. Sam leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "You did the right thing," he said simply. I didn't answer, because there was no right thing here. Only what was necessary. Lauren had destroyed the family I thought I had. But she hadn't destroyed me. I was still standing. And I was just getting started. 2 days passed without a word from Lauren. Not a call. Not a text. Not even another pathetic public stunt. At first, I thought maybe she had finally gotten the message. Maybe Daniel's abandonment, the exposure, the collapsing friendships had cornered her into silence. I should have known better. Lauren didn't understand loss. She only understood war. And she still had one last weapon to fire. It came in the form of a formal notice taped to the door of Sam's house. An official-sounding letter from Lauren's newly hired attorney, full of pitiful accusations. Emotional cruelty, abandonment, claims she deserved spousal support for the years of unpaid emotional labor she provided. I stood there reading it in the afternoon heat, the paper trembling slightly in my hand, not from fear, from the kind of contained fury that no longer needed to shout to be felt. Sam watched me from the porch, arms folded. "You gonna let her take another shot?" he asked. "No," I said. "It's time." The confrontation wasn't going to be behind doors anymore. It was going to be in the open, in front of everyone she had fooled. I made a few calls. Quiet ones. Direct ones. And the next morning, I stood outside my old house, now empty of parties, empty of Daniel, stripped down to its bare, desperate bones. Lauren came out after 10 minutes of me knocking. She looked terrible. Dark circles under her eyes, skin pale without the armor of makeup, hair thrown up like she didn't care who saw the cracks. But the moment she spotted the people gathering on the sidewalk, old friends, neighbors, familiar faces, the Lauren I knew snapped back into place, the mask glued tight with spite and pride. "What is this, Mike?" she hissed, stepping outside, arms crossed defensively. "You wanted a show," I said calmly. "Here it is." I held up a thick envelope. The crowd leaned in slightly, the smell of curiosity stronger than the muggy summer air. "This," I said, "is a record of every lie you ever told. Every affair, every bank transfer, every insult you spat behind my back." Lauren laughed. A brittle, high-pitched sound that echoed off the bricks. "No one cares, Mike," she said loudly, for the crowd's benefit. "You're pathetic, standing here like a child throwing a tantrum." I smiled. Not because she was wrong, because it didn't matter anymore. "You're right," I said. "They don't care." I dropped the envelope onto the ground between us. Papers spilled out. Texts, photos, statements, flashing like broken memories. "But the bank does," I continued. "The courts do. And every one of the people you lied to. They're not laughing with you anymore." Lauren's eyes flickered to the faces around her. The ones she had charmed, manipulated, dazzled. Their expressions had changed. Some were cold. Some were disgusted, but none were smiling. "You think you're some kind of hero?" she snapped, voice rising. "You're still the same boring, predictable man you always were." "No," I said softly, and the truth in that single word was a hammer to her face. "I'm the man who survived you." The crowd didn't cheer. There were no gasps or dramatic reactions. Just the heavy, brutal silence of truth landing where lies once lived. Lauren's facade cracked. The anger drained first, leaving her standing there trembling, exposed. She knelt. Right there on the hot concrete, gathering the papers in a frantic, broken shuffle, trying to stuff them back into the envelope, as if gathering them would somehow make the truth go away. I didn't move. I didn't say another word. I simply turned and walked back down the driveway, past the neighbors, past the old memories, past the woman who had built her throne out of my sacrifice and then set it on fire. The last thing I saw as I drove away was Lauren sitting on the curb, holding torn scraps of her own lies, rocking slightly like the ground had disappeared beneath her. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel angry. I felt free. Freedom wasn't a thunderclap. It wasn't fireworks or some grand revelation. It was quieter. A slow, spreading silence inside my chest where the noise used to be. It felt like breathing for the first time without someone else's hands wrapped around my throat. I thought it was over. I thought she was finally broken enough to leave me in peace. But Lauren never knew when to quit. Or maybe she just couldn't survive unless she was hurting someone. 2 weeks after the confrontation, just as the court dates were getting finalized, I came home from a late meeting with Harrow to find a small box sitting on Sam's porch. No note. No delivery slip. Just a plain, unmarked box. Sam wasn't home. The night was still. For a second, some old, stupid part of me wondered if it was a peace offering, some final, pitiful apology tucked inside. I should have known better. Inside the box was a collection of photos. Not printed off Facebook or stolen from my drawers. Real, old photos. Ones Lauren had clearly saved, ones of me with Ryan and Claire when they were little. Birthday parties. Beach trips. School plays. But every photo had been vandalized. My face scratched out. Black marker smeared across my features. Some were torn straight through the middle, my body ripped neatly away from the others like I had never been there at all. Taped to the last photo, a picture of me holding Claire on my shoulders when she was 5, was a handwritten note. 6 words. "You were always the outsider." I stared at it for a long time, something cold creeping up my spine. Not sadness. Not regret. Just a confirmation of something I had already started to understand. Lauren hadn't destroyed me because she stopped loving me. She destroyed me because she never loved me at all. The realization didn't shatter me. It didn't even surprise me anymore. It simply steeled me. I gathered the photos into a pile and burned them in Sam's old barbecue pit. Watched them blacken and curl into ash without feeling a single tear well up. Not because the memories meant nothing, but because the man in those photos didn't exist anymore. He had died at that graduation party, standing under the strings of lights he had hung himself, still believing he mattered. And the man who stood there now, watching the flames eat the past, didn't need anyone's approval to exist, especially not Lauren's. Still, the timing of the box gnawed at me. It wasn't random. She was planning something. I found out what it was 3 days later. Harrow called, voice tight, unusually serious. Mike, he said, Lauren filed an emergency motion. For what? I asked, already bracing. She's trying to claim emotional damages, saying you humiliated her in front of the community. She's asking for punitive compensation, a lot. I let the words settle. No rage, no panic, just a grim, cold certainty. How bad is it? I asked. This week, Harrow said. Pathetic, even. But if she drags it into court with the right sob story, some judge might toss her a bone out of pity. Another knife from the same hand. Another move from a woman who couldn't win honestly, so she was trying to bleed me dry on her way down. I didn't flinch. I didn't rant. I told Harrow to prepare everything. Because if Lauren wanted one last public battle, if she wanted to drag our rotten history into a courtroom packed with spectators, then I would let her. I would let her build the stage. I would let her light the fireworks. And when the curtain lifted, I would be standing there, holding up the truth for everyone to see. So raw, so ugly, so real, that not even Lauren's talent for playing the victim could survive it. She wanted war? Fine. I would end it on my terms. And this time, there would be no witnesses left who could pretend not to see the blood she had spilled with her lies. The courtroom wasn't grand or dramatic like in the movies. It smelled like floor polish and stale air. The hum of cheap fluorescent lights buzzing above our heads. The kind of place where lives are dismantled with paperwork and polite nods, not with screaming or broken glass. Lauren sat across from me, her lawyer whispering frantically in her ear. She wore a dark gray dress, hair tied back tight, makeup laid on like armor. From a distance, she looked poised, collected, but up close, I saw the small betrayals her own body gave away. The tapping foot, the clenched jaw, the way her fingers shredded the edge of a tissue she hadn't even used. The judge was a woman named Preston. Stern, no nonsense, the kind of face that had seen every dirty trick in the book and was already tired of whatever Lauren thought she was about to pull. Harrow stood beside me, a silent mountain of calm. The motion Lauren had filed was for emotional damages. She claimed my public humiliation of her at the house gathering had caused her severe psychological distress and irreparable harm to her social standing. She wanted money, a lot of it. Lauren's lawyer, a slick man with fake concern oozing from every syllable, started first. He painted her as a devoted wife who had been unjustly vilified, a woman who had suffered immense pain because of my vindictive public outburst. Lauren even teared up on cue. She dabbed at her eyes with the same shredded tissue, trembling just enough to seem believable to someone who didn't know her like I did. When they were done, Judge Preston turned to us with a nod. Your response, Mr. Harrow? Harrow didn't waste time. He stood, walked calmly to the evidence table, and placed a thick, bound file down with a heavy thud that echoed through the quiet room. Your Honor, Harrow said smoothly, before we address emotional damages, I would like to submit into evidence communications, bank records, and photographic proof of Mrs. Lauren Mitchell's ongoing infidelities, financial misrepresentations, and actions taken with clear intent to defraud Mr. Mike Mitchell over the course of their 18-year marriage. Lauren's head snapped toward her lawyer, panic flashing across her face. Judge Preston raised an eyebrow. Proceed, she said. Harrow distributed copies to the judge, Lauren's lawyer, and the court reporter. The room changed. You could feel it, the shift in weight, the pulling of attention. The lies Lauren had built her world on were being peeled back layer by layer, each document stripping another piece of her away. Harrow spoke methodically, almost bored, as he listed dates of known infidelities supported by hotel receipts and text messages. Financial records showing money siphoned from our joint accounts into secret ones she had opened alone. Emails where she mocked me to her friends, bragging about manipulating me, bragging about planning her freedom while I was out breaking my back to support her. Lauren sat frozen, her mouth a hard line, the tissue crushed in her hand, now just a wad of nothing. Her lawyer tried to object. Some nonsense about privacy violations, but Judge Preston shut him down with a single glance. When Harrow finished, he stepped back and simply said, "We would argue that any emotional distress Mrs. Mitchell claims is the direct result of her own long-standing deception, and not the actions of my client." The judge leafed through the evidence slowly, absorbing every word, every picture, every transaction. Silence reigned. Then she looked up at Lauren, her voice colder than ice. "Mrs. Mitchell, do you have a rebuttal?" Lauren opened her mouth, closed it. There were no tears now, no shaking hands. Just the raw, naked look of a person who realizes the final mask has been torn off in front of the very audience she had once controlled. Her lawyer stammered something about needing a recess, but Judge Preston waved it away. "I think we've heard enough." The ruling was swift. Lauren's motion was not only denied, the judge ordered that she pay my legal fees for the entire ordeal. And then, the final blow, Judge Preston stated for the record that based on the evidence, future hearings regarding asset division would heavily favor me, citing Lauren's calculated, prolonged pattern of deceit and misconduct. The gavel came down like a thunderclap. It was over. Not just the case, the entire war Lauren had waged against me. I stood up slowly, feeling the weight lift from my chest one heavy breath at a time. Lauren didn't move. She just sat there, staring blankly at the ruined pieces of the life she had tried to steal from me. No sympathy. No pity. Nothing. Just the end. I walked out of the courtroom into the blinding sunlight, the thick folder of evidence still in my hand, the city stretching wide and endless before me. The past was ashes. And for the first time in 20 years, the future was mine alone. Freedom isn't fireworks. It isn't some big explosion where the sky breaks open and your soul gets to start over. It's smaller than that. Quieter. It's sitting alone in a kitchen, the clock ticking on the wall, and realizing you don't have to wonder anymore who's lying to you when they say they love you. It's making coffee at sunrise because you want to, not because you have to fuel up for another day of sacrificing yourself for people who never noticed. After the court ruled, Lauren disappeared from my life like smoke. No farewell. No final ambush. Nothing. Through the grapevine, neighbors, mutual acquaintances, old coworkers, I heard pieces of what happened to her after. Daniel never took her back. The friends who rallied around her Facebook sob story abandoned her one by one, embarrassed to be seen near the fallout. She sold the house, slashed the price because no one wanted it anymore, and left town under some flimsy excuse about starting fresh. I didn't chase those stories. I didn't smile when I heard them. They weren't victories. They were just the natural consequences of a life built on ashes and lies. Claire and Ryan? They reached out once or twice, awkward messages filled with hollow updates, promotions, moves, meaningless facts delivered with brittle hope. I didn't block them. But I didn't respond either. I didn't have to punish them. Their own silence was their sentence. They would live with knowing what they allowed to happen. That's a kind of weight no apology could ever lift. Sam helped me pack the few things I cared about into a rental truck one morning, old tools, some photos that hadn't been defaced, a worn leather chair that still smelled faintly of home. "You sure about this?" he asked, handing me a final box. I nodded. I wasn't running. I was choosing. Choosing to stop bleeding for people who brought knives to dinner tables. Choosing to stop screaming into locked rooms, begging to be heard. I drove west. No plan. No deadline. Just the long, open roads and the sound of a new life humming somewhere just out of sight. I stopped in a small town 2 states away. Found a cheap apartment above a dusty old bookstore. The kind of place where no one knew my name, where I could sit in the window at night and watch the rain without thinking about all the ways I had been made small in my own life. I got a job fixing up old cars at a local shop. Nothing fancy. Nothing that needed a degree or a corner office or a title on a business card. Just honest work. Work where the bolts either fit or they didn't, and no amount of smiling could change the truth. Some nights, I walk down to the river and sit on the cold stones listening to the water drag itself towards somewhere else. I think about the man I used to be, the man who mistook endurance for love, the man who thought loyalty would be enough to heal betrayal. I don't hate him. He was necessary, but I'll never be him again. If you're reading this because you're standing at the edge of your own collapse, if you're wondering whether you should hold on a little longer, give a little more, swallow a little deeper, listen to me. You cannot save someone who loves the way you bleed. You cannot rebuild something when the other person keeps setting fires behind your back. And sometimes the bravest thing you will ever do is not to stay and fight, but to walk away before there's nothing left of you. I didn't win by beating Lauren. I didn't win by getting the house or the money or the sympathy. I won by surviving her. By walking through the fire she set and not letting it turn me into something as cruel as her. And now, when the sun rises, even on the bad days, I can look at it without flinching. Because finally, it's not shining on someone else's life that I built for them. It's shining on mine. And that's enough.